Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to look at how to build a game show quiz display using VMix and some intermediate scripting to pull it all together. But before we get into that, again, I want to welcome everybody. If you have any comments or questions you want us to answer here on the phone, just post them and we'll try to get to everything that you ask live. Also, if you would like to join us on air, we have a link posted in the show notes or here on the screen. So if you'd like to join us, just click there and somebody from the studio will get you on. All right, so let's get started. And I'm just going to jump over. We have a couple of comments. One of them is from Vlad, who's actually asking us, he's looking forward to the season 4 scripts. And I just wanted to jump in here right at the beginning and say that we ran out of space on GitHub for especially some of the larger shows that we wanted to post. So we're looking for an alternative. We've played with a few things, but hopefully we'll have that sorted out shortly and be able to post all the scripts from this season. So Vlad, thank you for asking about that. We also have Michael Quist. So Michael, great to see you here from sunny Copenhagen. I'm glad you are enjoying the summer there. 23 degrees Celsius might be a little warmer than I like, but definitely if you're sitting out on a terrace, it probably sounds just about perfect. So we have, let's see, we have Bill Mew, also just came in saying hello from Tunbridge Wells in the UK. Bill, thank you for joining us. And we have JP. So JP is saying hello to everybody from rainy Cape Town. So JP, thanks for joining. So for the show, I was trying to find a way to do a quiz-based show that wasn't overly complex. So one of the things that I recognized when we did a show where people were sort of an audience response, that was like a 3-part show. And I know that was probably pushing, the limits of what we could comfortably do in a live interactive show. So for this one, I wanted to do something that focused more on some of the basic stuff we needed to do a quiz show. And the way we're doing it this time is that we have a display and we are going to let people make guesses based on a question. And if those guesses are in a list, then we're going to go and mark that as right. If the guess isn't, we'll mark that as wrong. So let me actually jump in and show you what this would look like. So this would be the type of display. So we made a imaginary game show called Quizzical. So you can come up, you can have different topics that you can have. So you see, we just can change which topic. I can post the question, which will come up. And then as people guess correct answers, they will see them pop up on the side. And if they get a wrong answer, you can just buzz that as a wrong answer. And they will move across and get, multiple strikes. When they have 3 strikes, the game is over. If they get all of the questions correct, we automatically have a little bit of applause and confetti come out. So this is what we're creating on today's show. And so the first place to start with this really is, where are we storing the questions? We're using a GT title and we're using an XML file combined with Data Source Manager to link them. So let's take a look over at the XML we're using for this. So it's fairly straightforward. We have the main XML block, which is quiz. So this is all the questions. Then for each question we have here, we have the topic. So this is saying, what topic icon do I display? And we have the question text. And then we have each of the potential responses for that question. And this is basically it. You can add as many questions. So you sort of scroll down, there's no real limit. I could just add another question on any other topic and just edit it pretty simply. So it means that it's fairly expandable and customizable just by touching an XML file. So that's the first piece to this. The second piece, I'm going to switch over here to GT title so we can see the way we wanted to do this, as opposed to reading all this data inside of a script and then populating everything dynamically. What we wanted to do was basically just use rows in GT in the Data Source Manager for each question, and then populate this title using each one of those rows. What we do, though, is we control this title using scripting to sort of reveal things, play the sounds, keep score, all the types of things that we would have as part of this. So if we just go through what we have here, we have basically this is a backdrop. We have a topic, which is just if you look here, this is just a graphic image, and we replace that using a URL. So inside the GT title designer, when you map it into a data source, you can specify a URL to replace any graphic. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And then this is just the question name, all the question responses. And what we have, though, is we have little caps over these questions. So if I hide them, you can see over here, the questions get revealed. So what I'm doing in the scripting, when somebody gets a correct guess for one of the potential answers, is I'm actually going and hiding this little cap overlay with all the data behind it. But you'll see that all these responses here, like let me just sort of keep a couple of caps off so I can talk through here. The responses that we have here, these are being replaced with Data Source Manager. So when I go to question 1, these all become the answers for question 1. And so you can do this without having to write a lot of script. So the central framework here is all within standard VMix. And the sort of smarts behind this are in scripting. So that's basically the framework for how we're doing this. The mechanics of this, like I said, are fairly straightforward. So, and if I now jump over to, let me jump over to VMix very quickly to show you sort of the layout. All we have in VMix is like a blank screen. We had a little intro that we could play, but we have the GT title and then a set of different sounds that we use. And we have a winner overlay. So if somebody wins, that was that confetti. And if somebody loses, that was there's another thing with little smiley face crying. That goes in there for when people get 3 guesses wrong. So this is a very, very simple VMix preset. So a lot of this really is going to be based on scripting. So before we get to that, I think we may have a few other questions here. So let's see. So we have Vlad just came back and said, thanks. So yeah, Vlad, we will take care of the uplink for scripts, the downloads for scripts as soon as we can. And Michael Quista says, we'll gladly donate some money to support you stay. That's okay. I mean, I think we'll figure out a way to do this with, which will work for everybody using some of the resources we probably already have. But Michael, I appreciate that. So thank you. So let me talk a little bit now, since we've sort of gone through the overall structure of the elements that we have. Let me talk a little bit about how the scripting works. So what I would like to do very quickly is just jump over to my Stream Deck here, and we can take a look at how the control buttons work, because this really ties into the scripting. So this is sort of just make this a little easier. So what we have here for everybody that could run this show is we have a little loop that's basically the script that controls all the interaction. So I can start that loop and stop it. I can do a full reset or just reset a question. So we added a few things. If somebody wants to launch the question, you just press the question button. But I can go to previous and next question. So I have the ability to step through the questions. And then we have up to 7 answers. So if you get a correct answer, somebody will just press the corresponding button for that answer, and it will display on the screen. So that's basically the control for this. So it's a fairly simple control that somebody could do, from a podium if you had people that were doing this as part of an event and you were going through product features or something. So it's a fairly straightforward thing for handling. So that's the interface here. But the model that we're using to handle this is fairly straightforward, but very flexible. So what we're doing is in VMix, there's something called dynamic values, where you can basically save dynamic variable 1 to 4. So there are 4 dynamic variables. So what we're doing effectively is we have a script that runs in the background. And what it does is it reads dynamic variable 1. So every time it loops, it reads that variable. So it's like loops like twice a second. If that is 0, if it's set to 0, it comes back and says, okay, I have nothing to do. I haven't been asked to do anything. Sleeps for half a second and loops back. If there is a number in there, so I think we're using like 4 or 5 different numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. What it does then is it goes into a little bit of logic and says, if that's set to number 1, what logic do I want to execute? If it's set to 2. So it basically lets me, with one looping script, handle different chunks of logic for what I want to do to create interactions. So every time I press reveal an answer, that goes to one of the numbers, and it runs through a little bit of scripted logic. So that's how we do this. It makes it much simpler than trying to create a lot tighter integration. We're just using a dynamic variable to do that. And we use dynamic variable too if there's a secondary thing. So if I want to reveal a question, I can come back and say the function or the action from dynamic variable 1 will be reveal a question. The argument, the variable in that will be which question do you want me to reveal, 1 to 7. So it now allows me to effectively make a function call from inside of VMix using those two variables. What's the function and what's the argument? So very, very simple way to do this, but extremely powerful in terms of the way you can expand that and leverage that. So let's dive in. We'll really start with what this loop looks like. So go over here and we'll start. So in doing this, like everything, we initialize all our variables right up front in this. So we have general indexing things we use. This is what I was talking, the action and the action value. That's the function and the argument that you want to have for that. I have other stuff in here that if we wanted to do things more advanced later on, so like you could have player names or team names and scores for player A, team B, then we can come back and we can say, what's the index of the active question? We're not, really doing anything serious with that because we're controlling all of that on the VMix side. We have, what are the number of valid responses? So in this case, we made everything 7 to keep this fairly simple. What we also have, though, is a variable here called gave response. And what this means is that if somebody already selected the answer for question 1 and it was correct, we set that to true. So this way we know which answers have been given. And it's just an array that says first answer true, the next 3 false. And so we can turn around and say, okay, the first answer was given, the next 3 are still there. And this allows us to know things like, do I ring the bell or did they already give that answer? So you don't have, simple things like that we have to do. So we have that sitting there, and then other things that, we do the counting. How many correct responses? How many incorrect responses? So we know, did they get everything right? Did they get 3 wrong and they lost? Things like that. And so this is everything that we've set up here. And we did other things like player image URL. So like if you had 2 companies or 2 groups or 2 locations, you could do all that. None of that stuff was added, but this is sort of the thinking process that went into what we were putting together here. So the next thing we do, which can make this much easier to read, is as opposed to using specific input numbers or using the GUIDs associated with inputs, you can actually just use the name of the input as a way to execute functions against that. And so that's what we did here. So we have the title input, which is the thing that we're doing. That's why I showed you in GT title. And then we have all the different sound inputs that we're using here. So all the different tones that we're using as we trigger an action. And then at the last tier, we have the input for the winner overlay, which is basically a green screen with confetti, or the loser overlay, which is a green screen with a crying circle emoji. So this is everything that we have set up for this. And then we just dig into the actual loop. So we start right before we go into the loop, which is initializing both of these dynamic values to 0. That way we know it's not doing anything when the loop starts up. So no surprises there. And at this point then, we're in the loop. We read the XML document from VMix, something we've all done before. And we actually just pull out the dynamic, the 2 dynamic values, value 1 and value 2. And that's action and action value. And we do that in assignment. These inside of that are strings, so we convert them from strings to integers. That's the C that does that. And we pull that in. Then we're using a new not a new capability, something we probably haven't gone through much in our scripting before, which is a select case statement. So what the select case lets you do is say, I want to look at a variable, and for each case, each value, possible value of that variable, I'm going to take and execute different pieces of code. So if action is set to 0, I do a sleep. If it's 1, this is actually because we have a correct response, then I do other logic. So this is basically how that mechanism I said where you just set the variables and it will step through to execute logic. So let's do the first cases where somebody has given a correct response. So in this case, first we reset these values again because you don't want this to keep looping through if you had a correct response. The first thing you want to do when you process it is to say, okay, I'm handling it, reset this, and we'll make sure we don't loop and hit it multiple times. So we do that to do the reset. And then this is just Basically, if the answer was already given, we do nothing. And that's, if you remember, I said gave response. So what this is looking for is for the specific answer, that's the second value, the action value that we have in here. That's which answer was given. If that is true, so this lets us know, if that answer was true, don't do anything. And we just console, we write something to let us know. Otherwise, if it's false, then we go in and say, now set it to true because this answer was given. Up the number of correct responses because we're looking, once we hit 7, we know we've answered everything correctly. And then what I'm going to do is sort of the animation you see on the screen. And this is going to be, it's going to start out with audio. So the first thing we want to do is we want to pause. If somebody was getting right answers one after the other very quickly, what we want to do is pause the playback of the audio for the correct answer. So that's what we're doing here. Then we restart it, so it sort of brings it back to the beginning. Then we make the changes to things on screen. So what we do with the title is we set the text visible, so we display the answer under the overlay, that cap that we have over it, and then we set the cap to be invisible, so turn visibility off, which reveals the answer. And when we redo that, we then play the right answer video. So that's kind of the logic that we use repeatedly here. We will stop the audio from playing after doing the initial stuff, stop the audio from playing, put the right answer in, and reveal it behind the cap and play a sound. So at that point, the other thing that we're doing is we're saying if they've gotten this right, we'll bump their score up by 1. Because you could keep score across questions. You could turn around and say, if you get question 1 right, question 2, those scores could all add up. And so that is what you end up with here, just a way to keep the scores. If at that point, then we also set the text. This is one of the few things we're doing from scripting to actually change something in the GT title. But what we're doing is we're setting the text to say, show the new score. So every time the score bumps up, we have to update that score on screen. And we do that here. And then if what we do once we're there is we say, we'll have all the correct answers been given. So if that is the case, then what we do is we put overlay 1 on, and that is the winner overlay input. So basically, we're just putting something over it, which is a keyed out green screen of confetti, and we play audio, which is everybody sort of clapping and going, ooh. And that's it. So that's what we do for that case. And we repeat the same basic mechanism for each one of these. So case 2 is if there was an incorrect response. So sort of the opposite of this. So in this case, again, we reset that value back to 0 because we don't want to, we know we were told to play incorrect response, and that blocks it from being picked up a second time. We up the number of wrong responses. And so what we do, if you remember, is at first, as soon as they say wrong response, we put a big X over all of the answers. So it's a big X. But we just put that on temporarily, play a buzzing sound like, that you got it wrong. We wait 0.8 of a second, so basically 800 milliseconds, and then we turn that X off again. So that is the first indicator. And that, again, creates a more dynamic flow in this. This is just something we write out to our console so we know what's going on. And then what we're doing is, if we still have if this is one of our 3 wrong answers that we can get, what we're doing is we're turning on a little X in the lower corner for the first X, second X, or third X. And you can see the way we're doing this is we have the named elements inside GT Title Designer, and they're all called red X, and it goes 1, 2, and 3. The big one is red X 0 up here. So you can see that. But these are red X 1, 2, and 3. So all we're doing is saying that this is the first wrong answer. Turn on red X 1 dot source, which is how we know which one to turn on. But if it's the second, that will stay on, and the next one will get turned on. So we're sort of doing this across the board, so we can turn those on individually. And this lets us sort of keep track visually on screen for how many wrong answers are there. So we turn those on, and those stay on permanently. The big X flashes, these stay on permanently. We say if the wrong responses is greater than or equal to the max wrong responses, which means we've hit our 3 wrongs, then we do the same thing. We play the loser audio and put the overlay up to say, you lost, crying emoji, and then we end that. Everything else in here to do this is really fairly, just housekeeping things. So this is, you can reset a question, which will basically go and, reset all the values, so make sure all the questions, you don't have any counts for number right and number wrong. All of those things are taken care of. For the full reset, we basically are doing something similar. We're just changing more things. We reset all the scores and everything else. But these last 2 cases are really just housekeeping cases we have for doing everything. So that is the main loop script that we have here for making sure that we can handle all the interactive elements inside of the quiz show. So let's just very quickly, there are other scripts that we're using inside of VMix itself. So we have, let me jump over to the VMix screen for a moment here so you can see what we've done is we have a whole set of shortcuts for here, which are all just, show the question, show the answers, next question, and all the resets, things that we had set up for this. These are all running on basically scripts that we set up. And the scripting is basically each one of these individually. So I have that over here inside. I just sort of copied it out of here so it's a little more visible. But I want you to see exactly what we're doing. We have shortcuts that are triggering actions to the script. And you can see this is our quiz loop is still running in the background. So it's been running since just before the show. So let me switch back to Visual Studio over here, and I'll sort of go through. So what we're doing, some of these things, we don't need to involve any back-end scripting, anything in the big loop. This is just sort of very traditional API functions. So when we open a question, we are basically pausing the new question sound, restarting it, and then we just show that question, make that question visible on screen and play the new question audio. So this is what we're doing for new questions. To show any of the correct responses, what we're doing, this is exactly what you saw inside of the looping script. We're just saying all you have to do is set these 2 dynamic values and the looping script in the background will pick it up. So it's turned around saying value 1, which means your action is a correct answer, and value 2, which number answer is it? And it will just send that in and it will be picked up by the loop. So that's all that those scripts are doing. The next question is basically the next question and previous question are pretty much identical. They're basically going through and saying, we want to you go to the next row in the data source. So this is basically saying for this data source with questions XML, which is in Data Source Manager, pick the next row. So again, we're not doing any of this with fancy scripting. We're just doing this in standard VMix tools. And we set dynamic value to 8, which lets it reset everything and get ready for the next question. For the wrong answer, a very similar thing. We're just coming and saying set dynamic value and set it to 2, which is wrong answer, and it will just pick it up. Again, so the scripts that you have, as you see as we go through this, they become much, much simpler because the logic becomes placed inside a single place in the loop, and each one of these shortcuts now is basically just saying, I want you to loop, but for this particular case, to execute this code, this particular case. And it does that. And this is sort of the full reset where we're just turning everything off and on as we should. All the text goes off, all the caps go back on for all of the things in the GT title. And that is basically it. So we think it's actually a pretty useful thing. I mean, we mentioned in the show notes that one of the things we saw that we thought were really powerful in it is for a lot of people, doing this gamification inside events and other types of productions you're doing can really get people engaged. If you can see, when we started this, we were thinking of setting it up for multiple people and have competing groups, because when you are looking for audience engagement, especially if you're doing things with people that are remote, where you lose some of that immediacy in the dynamic you have, these types of things can reestablish that, where you are having people compete, people trying to get scores, people trying to succeed in a visible form, I think really creates that level of engagement that we want. So that was some of the things that we were thinking of in doing this. But this mechanism is really a good general mechanism, and hopefully something you'll be able to use as well. So let me jump back and see if we have any other questions or comments here. So we have Spatial. Spatial, always good to see you here. Thank you. So he's saying, this is so cool, inspiring. Well, I think the real goal here is to get you thinking. Everything that we try to do on the show is really around a technique that hopefully has broader applications than the one use case we show here. So let's see, we have Pocket Video School. Finally managing to catch a live show instead of a replay. So thank you. That's great. I love your shows and find them really helpful as I develop my VMix knowledge. Mark in the UK. Mark, thank you very much. As I always say, there's a lot of people that go behind getting this show on. So a big thanks to everybody that takes the time to watch, and I definitely appreciate everybody here that helps us bring this out every Friday. So Pocket Video, thank you. So Michael is saying, cool, fairly simple but effective. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You can make this as complex as you want over time. So you can just keep adding different actions. So you could have dozens of potential actions, each one sort of blocked off and handled inside of scripting, and potentially more complex scripting as opposed to what we showed here. But this could be something where at a certain point you'd want to do it in Node.js, where you have more things like functions and other things that you can use, but could accomplish the same basic thing, albeit with a Node.js system running in addition to VMix. So let's see. So how would you have a participant via VMix call getting the answers? So the model that we set up here was very much like a game show model. I'm trying to think of it. Think of something like Family Feud, if you've seen that show. I know it's got a global following. Basically, people themselves aren't selecting an answer. They're giving you an answer, and then you're saying, is that answer right or wrong? Is it included in the list or not? So that's basically the mechanism that this could work with. You could extend this potentially to multiple people, because we originally designed it so you could have multiple scores for person A, person B, things like that. And then you could have two people playing against each other, and it's just audio. So that person, you could have the host and that person on screen, and then sort of have in the middle between them the display. And every time they get an answer correct, you can see that pop up. If you look at the display we set up here, it has the question and the responses side by side. But you could easily do something where you sort of have host, guest, and then all you have is this piece in the middle with the answers sitting here. So helium, argon, krypton. So you could just do that and squeeze that to the middle. So you could split up the screen in different ways. And this is just how you'd set up the titles. But this is something where you as the host could then turn around and say, I'm just controlling everything through a Stream Deck when somebody gets it right or wrong. And then we have all these other assets that we can bundle to assemble it. So that definitely, very, very doable with remote guests, remote teams, other things like that. So if you are looking to do those types of things, there are definitely ways to do that. The other thing, if you're doing things where you have people that you want them, a larger community to work with, to respond to questions. You can actually do things where, if you looked back at sort of the quiz and polling thing we did at last season, I think, which was all in Node.js, that actually is just using comments. So it's reading comments from people where they can type 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So you could use that as a way to take in answers as well. So that'd be slightly more sophisticated, but you could certainly have something where if people typed in an answer, you would know that person typed in that answer. You could have scripting logic that would match the answers on the back end, and you could turn it over and put the person's name next to it that went there and put that answer in. So lots of different places you could take this, but hopefully that gives you some sense of how this would all go together. So let's see. So we have ISTV is saying he would appreciate if we would introduce a scripting episode for non-programmers, especially for VMix. So ISTV, absolutely. We want to do things that sort of work across. Probably in season 2, I think we have an introduction to VMix scripting. It's a part 1 and part 2. So those 2 shows should hopefully be a good intro to this, but we definitely want to do more shows that are more sort of fundamental scripting. And maybe I'll take a show, specifically again to sort of revisit this, because I think there is a broad enough interest. So thank you for asking for that. So let's see. So Michael Chris is saying, nice idea, like Jeopardy. Yes. So there's, there are lots of game show type things that you can do to make these happen. And I'm really impressed. There's lots of different ways to sort of work this in for the sort of engagement you may want with an audience or a community. So if I were doing this as a product, there's probably some things that I would, I'd approach this differently. So what I'm thinking, why don't we wrap this as the main show up, and I'll pick this up, Michael, right away in our post-show hangout, so we can talk a little bit more in detail about some of the things that are potentials here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for the main show. If you can hang around for the post-show, that would be great. If not, take care, be well, and we'll see you next week. All right, we are back here. Let me, Pocket School has a question. I'll get to that, and then I'm to sort of follow up from what we were talking about with Michael. I'll dig a little deeper into sort of how I would change this if I were doing something that I wanted to have a sort of bigger scope around. So Pocket was asking, would the chat comments option only work on YouTube or any platform that can use VMix Social? So the answer is it would work on any platform that can use VMix Social. And the way we were doing this, so it is possible. What you can do is you can actually take and create a title template that has all of the answers that people, all of the comments that people are making running through it. And you can then loop reading that title template, and every time somebody makes a new comment, you get all of their information. You can know what platform, their username, their response, and you can read that out of the title template, because that's just sitting there as data inside your VMix XML. And when you are pulling that out of the XML, then anything that would come across through VMix Social, you can actually see inside that template and pull that data out. So that will let you access anything that VMix Social provides. I will make one point, because this is something that has happened just this past week, though. It appears that Twitter, which is supported by VMix or was supported by VMix, now has different commercials around people that are doing applications that read from Twitter. So I am not sure that Twitter is going to be around, at least not freely available inside VMix Social. That's just something to be aware of. And this has nothing to do with VMix. It has everything to do with, the inner organizational changes going on inside of Twitter. So just to be aware of that. So let's see. So we have Michael. I wanted to get back. Let's see. So maybe connected via VMix Social. So across SoMe. I'm not sure about what SoMe is. So I apologize, Michael. But yeah, anything connected via VMix Social allows you to read it out of a title. And because the titles fully populate all their data inside of the VMix XML, reading that VMix XML lets you pull all that out. So very straightforward to do. Okay, so if I were doing this, so Michael, following up from the initial talk about sort of frameworks for making this work, I would probably look at this as something where you wanted to have multiple types of shows, multiple types of games, quiz interactions. One of them are these sort of top lists. These, pick the top 7, the top 5, whatever that is. Those are really great for audiences that are only connected, via sort of audio video, where they don't have any controls they can do. They can use. So those are very easy to run, from your end and don't require as much scripting. The next thing would definitely be multiple choice, where you have shows where you have to pick, the correct of 4 answers and sort of move on. So those types of things are all something I would see as another, game show-esque thing. The other can be timed shows, where you'd want to basically turn around and say, I want to have 2 people competing, and whoever gets the correct answer first can win. That would require something that you can do with people remotely. So you would need some sort of internet clicker or something of that sort that could work with people remotely and trigger something inside the studio. So that's, sort of the 3 things that I would think of in terms of frameworks and having those 3 models in it. And then just for scoring, you'd probably want to be able to do things that were either solo, so you can have one person, go through a whole series and then bring the next person, or do things that alternate back and forth, where you can have sort of team A goes, then team B, team A, team B, those types of things. So that would be another element that I'd want to add to it. And I'd also want to add different values for different responses. Clearly, if I just switch to the output over here from this question that we had, which was the 7 noble gases, the first 6 were pretty cool. Those are all things that people probably are relatively familiar with, at least they've heard of. Organism is not something that many of us would have heard. So if somebody guessed organism, I'd probably want to give them more points than I would give to somebody who guessed helium or neon or argon, which are probably slightly better known, at least for people that have the scientific bent. So I think that's something that definitely having that ability to score the value of different answers could be really useful and make the games more interesting, where people are actually trying to handle these harder questions. So sort of speaking, like if I didn't have time and I was doing this, if I didn't have constraints on time and I was doing this as a commercial option, that's probably some of the things that I would definitely put into this. So all right, so Mike was saying the SoMe equals social media. So yeah, it's working with the individual social medias. I think, certainly from the way I look at this, you have to really stay up to date with everything they're doing. And so if you put out code that's talking to them and using their APIs, it's a constant loop of what have they changed? Am I aware of the change? Because sometimes they make changes that break things and you're not even aware of that. So you have to be able to then respond very quickly to fix things. So I think using something like VMix Social, which is sort of acting as that proxy, takes you away from having to worry about any of the details of specific social media platforms. And you really just say, I have one mechanism to read all of this. And to be honest, the way I would do this, if you wanted to use VMix Social and did scripting, I would definitely set this up, probably something with Node.js, and set it up as a function where you have a specific template and everything else that you're using. All you're doing then is saying you can just loop and get every time there's a new response, it can come back and trigger an action. So I would probably, as from a technical point of view, bake VMix Social into whatever coding framework you have for doing the scripting. So just another way to think of it. So let's see here. So Ryo says, I'm going to have to watch the class later. So Ryo, yeah, I mean, I am glad that, you're able to make it, but, feel free, watch the classes. If you can send out anything to us for, if you have any questions or anything, we'll try to get some. We know we can't always do it as quickly as we like, but we'll definitely try to respond and help if there's any questions about things you see on the show. All right, so let's see. We have... So Rowcast is also saying he is running an esports live show now. Maybe that comment hasn't come on. Okay, so I'm told we're not able to sort this up for some reason, but he says, I'm running an esports live show now. Good alchemy for everyone. Yeah, I mean, these are the sorts of things where I think it can really be great. A sports show where you have a hardcore sports audience. One of the things, I mean, this is sort of goes back to the early days of, bar-based arguments where people would talk about different players, different teams, and be calling up facts and statistics. This is a great area for a game show because people are passionate about it, and people have a lot of false memories about some of these things with sports. So, like, oh yeah, I remember when he did this. It's like, no, that wasn't. It was over this. So you have a lot of good engagement from that. So I think with an esports show, you have the same sort of thing where you have a lot of people who think they're experts at different gaming environments and could talk all about how to do, exactly the right set of moves and actions or the best character to use for different roles. So a lot of fun stuff that you can do around that as well. So definitely pretty cool with that. So let's see if there are any other questions. There's one thing I'll wrap up, and if there's any other questions, we can definitely handle that. But everything I did here, like for the overlays, all of that was just based on basically taking little videos that we set up where they would play. So I put them up. The video would play. They were green screen, so they could work as an overlay. So we brought them up as sort of overlay 1, and we bring that up. And then when they finished playing, we had a trigger in them that sat there and said, when this video on completion with this video, we went and we then took the overlay 1 down. So that's how we did it. In each case, we just start the video playing as overlay 1, and then it would take itself down. So that's the sort of the mechanics behind that piece. So let's see, Ryocaster just said, yeah, that's really awesome. He said, I'd love to show you the VMix project sometime. Yeah, I would definitely be interested if you want to share it or talk about it. That definitely probably be something a lot of people, if there are things you wanted to share, there's a lot of people that would probably have an interest. But I definitely would love to talk to you about some of the stuff you're doing, or if you have links to some of the shows you produced, if they're public, then again, I think people would love to watch these shows and learn a bit about them. So please just feel free to post them inside of the Streaming Alchemy group, and everybody can look. And I'll make sure that we approve that going in, because we usually don't let people post random videos, but just make note that this is something I asked you to put up, and we'll get it up in for other people to look at. So let's see. So Michael Quista had an interesting point. I'm sorry, we're having an issue with VMix Social right now, so we're trying to have it pick up these things, but they're not all coming across right now. So Michael was saying, imagine use some kind of AI to host a game in the near future, sort of automated shows. Something we're actually looking at. So stay tuned. I've been talking with somebody about seeing what we could do around that. So that may be an interesting thing that we could add to the mix here. So good pointing that out. Thank you, Michael. So Pocket Video School is saying, will we be able to get the script up? We are back in live with the comments. Will we be able to get this script as well, John? The answer is yes. We're working out exactly what we can do. We may be able to get this script up on our GitHub site, so I'll try to do that right after this show. The other scripts from earlier, where we had more like we're packaging a VMix preset, that I'm going to have another way to do, so it's going to take a little bit longer. So, but I believe we should be able to get the scripts up for this. This should be fairly straightforward. All right, let's see. So, and Ryocast is just saying, sure, thanks for the trust. Yeah, I can tell you that if people share things with me, I will never use them unless somebody says it's cool, and we'll never talk about it. So, I sort of, definitely have a non-disclosure with everybody that shares stuff that they don't want public, and that's fine. We definitely want to have trust in this community, and like I always say, I'm really blessed to have a community like this where everybody works together and really contributes to help people, and I love everybody's engagement here. So thank you very much. So we have Michael Quist is saying, fantastic. Yeah, I am really hopeful we'll be able to do something with this. We've been talking about this, and so it may be something I may do with somebody else as to split the load, but definitely something I will share here if we get it off the ground. So and Pocket Video School, thank you. We will, like I said, we'll try to get that up as quickly as possible. All right. I think we're probably coming to a wrap point here. So thank you all for hanging out for our post-show hangout here. And hope you found this useful. Even if you're not using it for game shows, hopefully the general framework could be useful. And I also, just as an aside, I had posted a poll for different topics that people would like to see covered. And so far, we've had about 40 people respond. It's over in our Facebook group. So if you haven't responded, I appreciate it. It's really just letting us know different topics. I have like 10 topics listed there for things that, general topic areas that we cover. And so if you haven't had a chance, feel free to, post your thoughts there, because I definitely want to make sure all of your feedback gets into what we do moving forward. So, as Michael said, have a great weekend all. I definitely feel that. JP, thank you. It's great. Glad you could join us as well. And we'll see you all next week. Take care. Be well.